All right, we are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Wednesday. We're recording Tuesday night, and I have a treat for you. I have some guests that you've never heard before, but I think you're going to like hearing from these guests. First of all, they're young people, and people, you say young people don't listen to your shit, and I go, well, that's not true. I get a few. But these folks not only are young, but they're smart. They're professionals in California, and they also have a political podcast. So I have Anna. Did I say that right? I asked you this, Anna or Anna?
Anna, you're correct.
Anna and Michael. And Michael is
Yes, sir.
now you two have a podcast, right? You three of you had a podcast.
We do. Yeah, we left our third host in the dust.
Yeah.
He's not here today, but
But he's great and we love him. Yeah.
we have a
So
podcast called Political Playlist Happy Hour, which stems from a platform we created a while ago called Political Playlist. And Michael, I'll let you. You're much better at explaining what we do than me, so
well, I don't know. You're
you can
doing a good
mansplain
job. Yeah. So what Anna meant to say was that we're a podcast called Political Playlist Happy Hour. And the three of us got together in about 2020, 2021, because what we saw was this interesting tide changing in Congress, which was a number of young people started entering the political arena in Congress. And at the same time, we noticed that, and no disrespect to any of your older listeners here, but we noticed Congress was a little old relative to
Yeah,
our own ages,
I've
and
said it here
we're
too.
we're
Get rid of the old
millennials.
fuckers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what we noticed was, only at the time, only 14% of Congress was under the age of 45. And yet, millennials and Gen Z were the largest voting bloc. So we saw that as a very disproportionate representation. And yet, we saw this hunger among young people to enter the political arena in a much more meaningful way than they had previously. And so we thought, okay, well, these young folks are our next generation of leaders. We ought to know what they're saying and doing. We ourselves are very interested in politics and kind of by default became that friend in our friend groups who everyone came to us for political questions or political answers. They came to us with their political questions, and we kind of collectively thought, all right, well, maybe there's something here. Maybe we start a podcast like millennials do. It's kind of the new starting a garage band. And so that's how it really all began. And so we found a nice little niche in terms of covering the young Congress, 45 and under, which currently makes up about 17% of our Congress and hopefully growing. We'll
TBD.
see.
It's gone down
TBD.
actually this
But
term. It
yeah.
went from 19 to 17.
Yeah.
So
Well, no. I think people need to know a little bit about you, where you come from, because you're not just a few people that were standing in front of a Circle K just talking some shit. You guys are professionals. What
Yeah.
kind of things do you do?
Professionally, other than being a millennial podcaster who's interested in politics, I'm a screenwriter. I write primarily in television, but a little bit in film as well. And yeah, I live in Los Angeles. Michael and I live down the street from each other in Venice and a neighboring neighborhood called Mar Vista, which some of your listeners may or may not know, but Venice Beach, very known. And yeah, my
Yep.
interest in politics kind of dovetails a lot into my interest in storytelling in general. I think that a lot of what is so interesting about specifically the young people who are in government is that they are digital natives. They grew up with social media, or if not grew up, then they've at least adapted to it as adults. And they tend to be very good storytellers because of that and kind of have an ability to convey their message in a way that, at least to those of us who are on the younger side of the voting spectrum, feels really relatable. And so I've always been very interested in obviously telling stories. That's what I do for a living. But I think specifically when it comes to politics, just learning about people's stories and learning about where these young people come from and what made, because it's really hard to run for office as a young person. You don't have a lot of
Oh,
money. You maybe don't have a big career behind you. And you have a lot working against you. And they've done
Mm.
it and they've done it successfully at the highest level. So I just really enjoy learning about them and sharing their stories across the political spectrum. I think there are a lot of people I disagree with who have really amazing backstories as well. So
how about you, Michael? What's your background?
Well, I certainly am very similar to Anna in a number of ways. I also originally am
Oh
from
yeah, me too.
Connecticut, a few
We're
towns
also from
over.
neighboring
Yeah.
towns in Connecticut.
Yeah, and didn't know each other until we started this podcast, coincidentally. And so I'm also a screenwriter and director, producer, and I came at politics kind of from a different avenue. My family was not very politically engaged, beyond just, current events and whatnot. But, I didn't grow up going to, really following politics. And my political entry started in college when I had a group of friends and we did this end of semester dinner to kind of celebrate us finishing exams. And we would go to this dinner, and everybody was incredibly politically savvy except for me. So really my entry was, okay, I got to keep up at this dinner. Let me start learning about this.
The
And it was
shame. You
through
were
the,
shamed.
yeah, no kidding. And so I went from the neophyte to then the guy with a podcast. And so that was my political origin story. And similar to Anna, my storytelling background does draw me to, the element of politics that is story and story
Right.
driven. I think that is so much of our politics at the moment. Um, and so I have a natural affinity to that.
Michael
But
also
yeah,
watches like more cable news than anyone that I've ever
I
met.
do.
So I would say that
Yeah.
out of the three of us, he is the one who has CNN literally on his television all day long, which is maybe more of a boomer characteristic than
I
a millennial characteristic.
I don't know if you can see in the background. I have a stack of New York Times that I haven't gotten
Wow.
through yet. So I'm an analog guy. Um, my lights went out here. I don't know if that's a sign. Hang on one sec.
Yeah, yeah, you look fine. You look fine. What's funny is my lighting here is shit because I usually at home I have better lighting, but
It's all
um,
good. Everyone looks great.
for
Yeah.
for for a guy who's 65 years old, bad lighting sometimes is positive. So I'm not. I wanted to ask you guys. You're millennials, and I can relate to millennials because I have two sons and a daughter-in-law that are millennials. And as much as
Nice.
millennials bitch about boomers and boomers bitch about millennials, I've always said this: if you're a boomer and you're bitching about millennials, you fucking raised them. So maybe you ought to look at your own
Oh, that's
parenting
great.
skills
That's great.
if they screw up. But at the same time, I tell my son, he goes, "Well, you boomers are so selfish. It's all about you. You took everything." I said, "Tony, here's the deal. I remember when you were 5 and I went and spent $200 on nothing but plastic Batman shit. You weren't complaining about it then. So don't tell me about entitled. Fuck
Yeah.
you."
I know, but the problem is, I think then we got accustomed to a certain kind of lifestyle that our parents could provide. And then suddenly we had to be responsible for ourselves. And we were like, wait,
Well,
the
Yeah.
that's a
world
good
isn't
Shit's
set
point.
up like that
expensive.
anymore.
That's an excellent point. I'm trying, my sons, like a lot of millennials, deal with anxiety sometimes, even my daughter-in-law to a certain extent. I'm going, the fuck are you anxious about? Your life was so easy.
Oh,
And then
there's a
somebody
lot.
sat down and explained it to me. It was so easy and we took care of everything. You get out in the real world, there's some adversity. You don't know what to fucking do with it because mom and dad aren't fixing it. That's where we failed. We
Hmm.
didn't let you experience as
Mm.
much adversity as maybe we had. Because for us, it kind of rolls off our back. But I can understand somebody being anxious now if they just don't know how to deal with the shit.
It's interesting. I think that now, I was mentioning this before we started recording, that I feel like I'm 34 and I feel like you're completely correct in the sense that, I mean, I didn't really, but I know a lot of people had like helicopter parents, really hard to leave the womb, as they say. And
Yeah.
but I think in general, life was made pretty easy for us. Obviously there are people who had very difficult circumstances. So that's not I don't want to be sort of generalization about it, but I agree with what you're saying. What I think is interesting is that as the world has kind of fallen apart from kind of 2009 to now, um, we have been in a period of life where we can't like learn how to struggle because we also have to take care of ourselves. Whereas it's
Right.
interesting, I think you look at like Gen Z, the financial crisis going into the Trump years and all of that, they were still under the wing. So this sort of
Yeah.
idea of struggle and the idea of maybe everything not being so great was in a safe place. And I think that the thing that I have felt, at least, and I won't speak for Michael, but for me, is that I'm like, I feel like I've had to deal with both my own kind of individual interests and individual goals while also balancing it with um needing to like figure out the world and in a world
Right.
that isn't always friendly to people our age and the stage of life that we're at.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is what I say to people when they say, "Oh, the world's crazy and we're not going to make it through it." I'm not one of those guys that ever believe that I'm not going to make it through it because I'm 65 and I've gone through all the trials and tribulations everybody's gone through, and fuck me, I'm sitting here and I'm doing fine. What I tell people is, we've never gone through a time like this before. I mean, this is absolutely crazy. This is like a bizarro world. This is surreal. But when I was very young, I grew up in the 60s. And you would never remember the 60s because you weren't alive yet. But you have to remember in the 60s, we had the Vietnam War. We had four major assassinations: JFK,
Yeah.
RFK, MLK, and Malcolm X, among other situations. We had protests, we had riots, we had civil rights, we had women's rights. It was a crazy time. But when I was born in 1960, so I didn't know any different. Yeah, it's fucking crazy. This is the way it always is. And then, of course, I got into the 70s. I found beer, maybe a little dope here and there, and things settled down. So I'm saying is that no matter how bad it gets, it seems to even out ultimately, and we get through it. It's been 250 years we've been in existence. It's painful now, I understand that, but I really believe that we will get through it, and justice will be meted out ultimately.
Mike, let me ask you a question because I think it's so interesting when I talk to people, particularly older folks, my parents, their friends, and whatnot, who are all similar age ranges as you. I feel like they all, by and large, say that, oh, the 60s was crazier than now. And I'm curious, like, because I hear that and I think, well, you're absolutely right. We have, the Vietnam War, which we don't really have a comparison to.
Yeah.
Afghanistan, Iraq, I think is a very different beast. Assassinations, as you pointed out, it was an incredibly turbulent time, and yet it does feel like, to my reading of it, there were still these sort of norms and I guess, for lack of a better word, laws that held leaders accountable, that I feel like that seems to be the thing that's now being ripped off like a band-aid, or worse. But I'm curious, like, what do you say to people who are like, oh no, the 60s was way worse than what we're
I,
in now?
I wouldn't say they were way worse. They were dramatically different. I mean, you have to
Yeah.
understand, back in the 60s, racism and sexism was just accepted. I mean, if somebody
Yeah.
came on some, we're in mixed company and they said the N-word, nobody'd freak out about it. I mean, they might say, "I don't say that," but it
Right.
wouldn't be like it is today. So racism was accepted back then. Um, you're right. Up until Donald Trump came in, norms were this magical thing. Oh, nobody will step over the norms. And then
Right.
Donald Trump walks over the top of them. And that's a dangerous situation because Donald Trump won't be the last person to walk over norms if it's allowed to continue. The other thing we
Yeah.
have differently now, because I think a lot of problems we have in Congress and a lot of problems we have in the world in the 60s and 70s, we never heard about them. You know,
Hmm.
there was polite company and there was some kind of corruption and crazy shit going on, but you didn't hear it because you didn't have 24-hour uh, news, and you didn't have the internet, and you didn't have goofballs out like me coming out and talking about shit. So it is a much different world. I think in terms of turbulence, it was very turbulent. I tell this story all the time. I remember being about 7 years old. It'd be 1967. I'm sitting in the living room by myself, and I'm bawling my eyes out. And my mom comes in and goes, "What are you crying about?" And I point at the TV, and at the time, this was the riots at Madison in Wisconsin, and people
Mm,
were
Mm.
getting beat up and hurt,
yeah.
and I'm crying. She goes, "What are you crying about?" And I point at the screen. I go, "Mom, I never want to go to college," because that was my perception of what college was. You go there, you have to
Wow.
get your ass kicked. Um, I think it's totally different. I wouldn't compare that to this, but I do compare the turbulence. We have turbulence now. We have turbulence then. We had turbulence at different times in the country. We had
Mm.
tragedies like 9/11. People said, "Oh God, the world's going to end," but we got through that. So it's different kinds of turbulence. It's maybe more intensified now because we know more about what's going on. We're
Mm,
afforded that information, and that may be the thing that's working against us and causing the anxiety because we know too much shit.
mm.
Yeah.
I also think there's an element, when you say sexism and racism were just kind of par for the course, it's like it's no wonder that everything feels so quote unquote crazy now because more people are allowed to have ideas than
Right.
were in the past, and more people
Yeah.
were allowed to hold power than were in the past. I think that, like, someone, to kind of put the gold star on her, someone like AOC would have never really
No.
been allowed to exist in that way or that role, certainly in the 60s. And I think that but even like across the spectrum, you have more women in Congress, you have way more Republican women recently than we did in the past. And like, I think that there's, it's like we're sorting out how to deal with all these people who have such diversity of thought because it's our system, I don't think, was set up for that. And the unfortunate repercussion has been that someone who can capture sort of like the media personality of it all is the one who gets to lead it. And Democrats so far haven't really had an answer for him, but I think that that's an element of it is that we just allow more people to speak their minds and allow more people to different kinds of people to be in power, and that's kind of we're in the sort of sussing it out moment potentially.
Well, Anna, here's something you should know. Maybe you do already know this, but as a woman in her 30s, if this would be the 1960s, you would not be allowed to have a credit card.
Yeah,
You could not buy a car. You could not buy a house. I mean, it's not that long ago, but it was
Wow.
dramatically different. We've come a long way, but now we
yeah,
have people coming into office that want to peel back to the 60s and 50s, and it's upsetting to say the least.
yeah, 100%. My mom, I think you and my mom would be good friends. My mom grew up in Jersey in the she was born in 1954, grew up in Jersey in the 60s. She was like she would like burn her bras and was marching to protest the Vietnam War. And I remember it was so funny when I was like 12 or 13. She would always tell us stories about how she was so radical and all this stuff. And then I was 12 or 13, I think I asked her flat out, I was like, "Well, do you smoke weed?" And she was like, "No, never." And my dad just started cracking up.
That's
I got
great.
to
I
tell
can
you,
attest, Anna's parents are very fun.
I got to tell you, the most disappointing thing to me being young in the 60s, that whole free love and women burning bras, I missed it. I was 8. It didn't matter to me.
Yeah, you're
This
my
Yeah.
was,
dad and you're actually the exact same age, so you've had the same generational experience. My mom's a little bit
how did you
older.
how does your dad feel at this state? We're going to talk about the youthful people in Congress because that's one of the things we set out originally. But how's your? I always say I'm sick of old white men because it's the one group I can be prejudiced against and nobody can say shit. Um, but there are a lot of dumb old white men. Uh,
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
I
Hold on now. Hold on.
He
What?
didn't say dumb young white men.
no
No,
dumb old white
yeah,
men.
I'm with you. There's some dumb ones, young ones too.
Well, and people say, "How can you say that?" And I said, "Well, go back to my motto. It's my fucking show. I'll do whatever the fuck I want. And if you don't like it, don't listen." But most
Yeah.
people understand how I think here, and uh, it, 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 it I don't understand how I can grow up in a part of town in South Minneapolis, which was basically suburban at the time, and I've got people I went to school with that are Trump humpers. And they'll come up and talk to me, assuming I am too. And I go, what the fuck is wrong with you? I mean,
Interesting.
I tell people, I said, look, if you stand behind Donald Trump, there could be only two options. You're fucking evil or you're stupid. And because I'm a glass half full guy, I'm just going to presume you're stupid, just to be nice about it. And there are many people I grew up with, and some people in my family just don't like it. But you sit down and talk to them, they can't explain anything. They can't back up anything. How does your father, who's my age, feel about the old white people in this country?
I mean, my dad is sort of was like really my entree into politics. He was involved a little bit in Obama's campaign in 2008. He was very involved in Hillary's campaign in 2016.
Wow,
And then he was a little bit involved in Biden's in 2020 and a little bit involved in anyway, he couldn't agree with you more, I would say. I think my dad is he's very, very much an optimist. I definitely get that from him. So I don't know that he would be quite as harsh as you are about, as you say, the Trump humpers. I think from his perspective, my mom would, by the way, use exactly the language that you're using. But
I
my
like
dad
her.
maybe is little bit more diplomatic. I think that he grew up in California. And so maybe didn't have the exact same, he didn't have the same experience that you did in terms of being in a more politically diverse environment growing up, or in college and whatnot. But I do think that he very much agrees that, there's a new generation of people who are ready to step up. And I think that he would be the first. I mean, I make fun of him all the time for being old, even though he's not that old. But I think he'd be the first to say that, like, there are people who know better than our 78-year-old president about how to, run the future of this country. And that's very much how I feel. I don't think that we need to put like a 30-year-old in the presidency, but I would have liked to see, maybe like a 50-year-old woman in the
Yeah.
in the chair instead. And so, yeah, I think that but my dad is a more diplomatic person for sure. I mean, I have my husband's family is very conservative and not super Trumpy, but very like military family kind of a thing. And it's interesting. Like, I feel like I've tried to maybe inherit a little bit of my dad's diplomacy in that regard, because it's tough,
Yeah.
it's easy to have the conversation, but it's tough to like really get into it in a way that feels, mutually respectful with your family, I guess. So I try to maybe emulate my dad a little bit when I'm in that position.
People have said to me before, they said, you should run for office. I go, no, that wouldn't work because I'm not diplomatic at all. My personality is my personality. And I finally found some freedom in that I don't have a boss to tell me you can't
Hmm.
do it or you shouldn't do it. My family knows better than to tell me not to do it because they know I'm just going to do it anyway. So it gave me an opportunity. And here's what I found. I'm curious what you think about this, Michael. I did it inadvertently just because it's my personality. But I believe Donald Trump got the supporters he got is because there's a lot of people that feel like they've been oppressed or ignored by the government. And Donald Trump wasn't your typical politician, wasn't an establishment politician. He came out and said, yeah, I hate the fucking government too. I'm going to kick their ass for you. And they jumped on board because that was the only hope they had. They didn't care whether they believed him or not. Here's the one guy that's going to fight for him. But when you're doing something like this, um, people who listen to podcasts or radio stations or TikToks, they don't want somebody that's going to commiserate with them. They want somebody who's going to kind of be a leader of sorts, whether that's my intention or not, by being strong and saying the things I say. I'm basically giving the Republicans back what they've given the Democrats for the last decades, you
Mm.
know? And the thing I
Totally.
get the most from people is people say, you said exactly the what I wanted to say in the way I wanted to say it. So they feel like I'm kind of representing them. And I think that's how they feel about Donald Trump. At some point, you need somebody
Hmm.
who's going to be strong and loud, would not be a good politician. But I'm fine with sitting on the outside stirring the shit. Absolutely.
Well, I
Who do you
think
see as that? Sorry, Michael, to interrupt you. Who do you see as that person from your seat right now?
like from the
Who
Fine.
was that?
Democrats.
Yeah, who's the person that you feel like is gonna be if you're not gonna be if your prototype is not the person to sort of galvanize Democrats? Are there any politicians out there that you see that you think are both doing what Trump did for Republicans, but also maybe have a little bit of that diplomatic flair to bring the coalition together?
There's one person, and I don't even know that he'd be a good presidential candidate, but he's different than other politicians. He kind of says what he has to say. He does it in a more down home way, and that would be Tim Walz. I don't know if he's
Mm.
strong enough to be a presidential candidate, but he'll go up there and make fun of motherfuckers. He'll say shit. He'll say Elon is dancing around like a dipshit. So so he might be that guy. I just don't know if he'll have as much support by the time he gets there. I think when Donald Trump got elected the first time, that should have been a red flag. I'm see what you think about this, Michael. It's a red flag. What that told me was people were tired of establishment politics and they were willing to take a flyer on somebody they didn't know anything about because they were so sick of the way government had gone up to this point. Now, Democrats and Republicans should look at that and go, "Oh, fuck, maybe we should change some things." They didn't, of course. What do you think about that, Michael?
Well, I think I'm immediately drawn back to how we began this conversation about story. And I feel as though what has made Donald Trump such a juggernaut in politics is his ability to communicate. However ridiculous we might think he sounds, however stupid or crazy his ideas are, or how unpolished he is or seems, there is that authenticity. And I think that a lot of folks felt and still feel like he's speaking to them. Right. And so, I think about I come from a very large Irish Catholic family, and you would think that we're all Democrats, but given ages, there's a lot of people who are dyed in the wool Reagan Republicans, right?
Right.
And for better or worse, they're still living in 1991. Okay. Tassel loafers and all. And so it's like, their idea of the Republican Party today is not what it is. They are trying to make the Republican Party something that they want it to be that it is not. And they are also Obama Trump voters, some of them. So I think I go back to that and I think, okay, what would make somebody vote for Obama and then feel as though those policies failed to the extent that they would then embrace somebody like a Trump? And I the only thing that I can really pinpoint is story and authenticity. Obama told a great story and he seemed really authentic to a lot of people. And I think he's as polished of a politician as he is. I think he's also a pretty genuine guy. And I think that, you look at the recent, Bill Maher detente with
Oh man.
Trump, and, he's
Bad
out there
move.
saying, yeah, and
I
he's
have some
like,
thoughts about that.
yeah, and I'd be so curious what you guys think. But, he's out there being like, wow, he's such a different guy in real life. He's playing this character, but that character connects with people, and people are like, you know what? The system has wronged me. The system has failed me. All these politicians keep lying to me. This guy is telling it like it is. And Mike, it's a lot like your podcast. You're not like you couldn't give a shit what people think. You're going to do your thing, and they're either going to like it or they're not. And
Right.
he's doing something that people are liking. So of course he's going to keep doing it. Of course he's going to keep saying this crazy shit because he's hitting that nerve that I think people are needing to be, that it's the nerve that people need hit. And the question is, who on the Democratic side is going to hit the other nerve that needs to be hit? The nerve that is, hey, guys, this is fucking crazy. Remember when he said he was going to fix the economy on day one? Yeah. Okay. It's day 90, whatever. Yeah. How are the eggs doing? Pricey as hell. So, like, who is going to hit the nerve? And this goes back to the kind of populist politics that I think we're in right now. I think that's kind of the environment that's going to win out, for better or worse. And so, who is going to hit that other nerve that needs to be hit on the Democratic side to bring this ship back to, uh, I don't know, sanity, I guess
Well,
is a start.
the the thing is that Democrats have always been the same. People always complain. They don't have a good narrative. They don't have a good message, and that is true. And I think we could learn a lesson from when Cory Booker did the 25-hour speech.
Yeah.
A lot of people, a lot of Democrats out on TikTok were saying, "Oh, it's just performative. He didn't accomplish anything." Well, yeah, he did accomplish something. He accomplished something that Democratic voters wanted more than anything. A little fucking fight, a little
Yeah.
effort, instead of sitting back with your thumbs up your ass, waiting for the next election and hoping to God you win. And that's what the Democratic Party has to be. I'm wondering if all of this we're going through isn't good because we're going to have a complete reset in our government. Republicans are going to be in trouble. They aren't going to be able to so, get elected if they continue down this road. And there are many Democrats. There's maybe a handful of Democrats that feel like they have the strength and the fight in them to go after this. So
Yeah.
maybe this is a good thing. Maybe we get rid of a lot of these people like the Schumers and stuff that are just too old. And that brings me to what you brought up initially. We definitely do have too many old politicians. And these old politicians are entrenched in their positions and they have power. And, one of the things that irritates me more than anything, seeing Nancy Pelosi and Schumer pretty much pull the strings on Hakeem Jeffries. This guy has a
Mm.
potential to do a lot of things. He's a strong guy. But now I'm pissed off at him because he seems like he's pulling back and not doing what he needs to do. There has to be one person to do it. And unfortunately, the one person who's doing it is fucking 85 years old.
Yeah.
That's Bernie Sanders. Now,
Performing at
Yeah.
Coachella.
It's
yeah,
unbelievable. It's
and
unbelievable.
now AOC is solid too. She's doing what she needs to do. Jasmine Crockett.
Mhm.
I just hope that there is a massive shift to people like them because I say this all the time that I'm 65 years old. As much as I like power and money as anybody, I should not be determining your future because I
Mhm.
won't be here for that future. I don't have any business talking about it. That's why we need young people to step up. That's why I was interested in you guys because I've always said young people need to step up, man. The old people did what they did. They did okay for a while, then they fucked it up. It's kind of on you to change this shit because we got boomers dying 5,000 a day. I don't know what my date is, but I think it's a ways down the road because I'm a young boomer. But really, this is the time when millennials and maybe some Gen Z need to take control. And if you have to, rip it out of their dead cold hands of the old people.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that it's interesting, like when you look at the rallies that AOC and Bernie are having, they had one in LA last weekend where there's
Mm.
36,000 people.
I was supposed to
Yeah.
go. My
Yeah,
I have a good friend who used to work for and kind of still does for Bernie and was involved in the planning of it.
oh,
And
that's cool.
yeah.
Yeah, I had friends. I mean, it was amazing. And I guess that my like cynicism about it is that I feel like we need to see like more of a coalition and not
Mm.
just Bernie, who, isn't going to be around for that much longer, and then AOC. Like, I think Maxwell Frost is getting in there, like you said, Jasmine Crockett. But I also
Mhm.
think that there are some more moderate minded Democrats who, if they can like let the claws come out a little bit, can sort of, like I've said this on our podcast before. I wish that Bernie and AOC weren't just bringing like the Maxwell Frost and the Jasmine Crockett. I wish that they were reaching out to like the John Ossoffs. I wish that they were reaching out to maybe, like Brittany Peterson, actually, who we just interviewed, who's from Colorado, who's been leading this whole proxy voting fight for new parents and that has gotten
Eric
so much
Swalwell.
publicity. Eric
Yeah.
Swalwell, like people who maybe are not quote unquote like squad progressive, but have an amazing story, have some fight in them. Like, I want to see all those people coming together a little bit more in this moment when we're in year one of the Trump second term, so that by the time that year 3 and 4 come around, we get a better understanding of like, okay, who really is the leader of that coalition? Like, is it AOC? Maybe. But I think if you don't get enough voices at the table who are willing to fight, then we get into a situation that I think we got into with Kamala, which is that there's sort of an anointment happening. and there's not necessarily the conversation between different perspectives with the claws out, as you said, um, to to defeat what's coming up on the right.
Can
So I don't
I
know. I
jump
just
in
want
on
to
the
see more
anointment?
people out there, more young Democrats out there getting getting known and sharing their ideas in a way that feels aggressive and like they're fighting. Because I agree with you. I think that's what needs to happen.
So I think that like what's so interesting to see is the crowds that Bernie is getting right now are obviously he's one of the most effective messengers right now. And clearly he is a rock star among a lot of areas or groups within the Democratic Party. But I think his job right now is to play kind of kingmaker, right? In a way that I think Trump
Yeah.
should have played this past go around for
Hmm.
Republicans. And but never will because that's not in his DNA.
He's
But
gonna die
you
with a hamburger in his mouth in the Oval
know,
Office.
exactly, yeah.
Let's hope.
Maybe sooner than later, yeah. But I think what's so interesting is like obviously there's a natural gravitation for Bernie towards AOC. Personally, I haven't seen it yet for her. I think that she is somebody who I've been talking about on our show needs to pick a few causes and actually start doing stuff regarding those causes. Start putting forth legislation that gets passed into law. She needs to start building her track record other than just filling a crowd at a park. But I think what is so interesting to see is I agree with all the coalition stuff. But I think Democrats need to start getting raw and vulnerable. And I was watching clips of Josh Shapiro today. And I
Mm.
think Josh Shapiro is a great example of somebody who has been doing the Obama light impression for most
Yeah.
of his career, and it's worked. And by the way, I like Josh Shapiro, I'm a fan. But I think he had some real raw authenticity today in light of what happened to he and his family that I think made him so human. And when I think about, we were talking about what makes Trump effective, he feels human. And however much I want my leaders to be better than me and larger than life, I do relate to somebody who is human. And I think, you know, I forget who said, never let a tragedy go to waste. I think Josh Shapiro has like like this was a really authentic moment for him.
Right.
And
Right.
I think he needs to double down on showing that side of him to people. And I would say this to all young leaders and Democrats, show your vulnerability, show your authenticity because people relate to that. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about with story. What is your story? How are you going to build this coalition? And I think where Donald Trump is given a permission structure to be unpolished, to say things, and for better or worse, and to not rehearse and to not be that scripted by the book, old stodgy idea of a politician. And I think folks should run with that.
I think you're right about that. In terms of the authenticity, it kind of goes back to what I said before. I think people are getting tired of establishment uh, politics,
Yeah.
politics as usual. And because I think, as well as some of Donald Trump's base feels like they're being oppressed, I think normal people are feeling like the government isn't working for us. And
Hmm.
surprise, we're finding out the only
Right.
thing that matters to these people is to get reelected and to make money. The idea of
Right.
serving us is secondary, if even there at all. Um, and if you're right, if somebody can come up and be authentic, but there's not a lot of courage in Washington
No.
D.C. I mean,
Mm-mm.
take a look at the Republicans. I was thinking about this today, and I said something. I was going to do a TikTok about it, but I didn't. It was too late. Um, Donald Trump is in a death match with China, and he's going to fucking lose. And he just does what he always does. He ramps it up. He's going to take this
No.
over the cliff. It's going to crash horribly, and that's how he does things. He can't get a phone call in to the president of China. China's saying, "Fuck you. We're tired of your bullshit." But
Right.
what he
But I
does
thought
do,
they were
he
such great friends, you know?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and everybody's kissing my ass. So God, yeah, I'm
Right.
sure he's
Right.
worried. But then he brings the president of El Salvador to the White
Ugh.
House, which is a horrific thing in its own right. Bringing that kind of guy into the White House is akin to having two Russian spies in the Oval Office from the
Right.
first term.
Right.
Yeah.
But then when he's asked about bringing back this Abrega Garcia, he said, "No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it." And it's frustrating to see him blatantly go over the norms, like you said, bowl over the norms, break laws, and do that stuff. And everybody says, "Oh, what's going to happen now? He's went against the Supreme Court." Well, what the fuck is going to happen? I mean,
Yeah.
to me, it
Yeah,
seems
I mean,
like
today
they, if they
we
allow this to
entered
happen,
now officially the constitutional crisis, right? That folks have
absolutely.
been warning about. I mean, today we saw that the president from the Oval Office just said, "I'm not going to follow the Supreme Court order." So I have no idea what's going to happen. You're totally right that now all of the things that all these people have been warning about, this constitutional crisis, what does autocracy in the United States look like? Well, today was the day. Today was the day that it was on display.
Well,
Um,
they were talking about they made a joke about sending American citizen prisoners now
right.
to these jails that we're apparently going to be leasing in El Salvador. And it kind of makes me think it's sort of like, what is the thing that is going to, you know, change people's minds or make people see that this is not only ridiculous, but getting very dangerous? And I feel like it's just, we're such an individualistic society that only when something affects us directly do we actually like give a shit about it. I think there are some people, I would hope that the three of us are in the category where you see beyond yourself and you see
Mm.
beyond, your life and your money and your family and whatever. But I think a lot of people, whether it's because it's their personality or just because they don't have the means and the privilege to be able to think beyond themselves, that there's no sense of like more global responsibility or national responsibility to our fellow citizens. So it's really interesting to me when he's talking about sending American prisoners now overseas to El Salvador, which is just like literally out of a freaking like fascist action movie. And they're saying, I'm like, okay, well, what happens to people who have relatives in jail? Like, surely there are a lot of Republicans out there who have relatives who are in jail or in prison.
Right.
Like, is that a thing that's like now it has to reach this level for people to see how insane all of this is, that maybe their relative who is in prison is going to be sent to El Salvador to these dangerous prisons with like gang members? It's just it's like, how far does it have to be pushed before people are like, oh yeah, this actually is bad because now it
You
affects
know,
me.
the thing is today when you see what he's done with the tariffs and he's crashing the economy and the bond market and all this stuff, he acknowledges that he loaded an innocent person on a plane, sent them to
Right.
an El Salvador brutal prison, which was totally against what a court had said before. Even if you do deport him, you can't send him to El Salvador. Donald Trump didn't care.
Right.
We find out that he was sent incorrectly. Donald Trump's administration acknowledges it. The Supreme Court and several other courts said you got to bring him back, and Donald Trump says no. He brings the president of this dictator from El Salvador in and treats him uh, uh, like he's a celebrity, and then he kicks Zelensky's ass. If everything in this world were right and everybody was brave, and there are very few brave people in Congress, Donald Trump should be impeached tomorrow,
Yeah.
100% in the House and 100% in the Senate, because nobody can explain away what's going on now. This is contrary to the Constitution. It is criminal. It's certainly corrupt, with the manipulating of the stock market and crypto and all this stuff. This fucker's just going rogue in this country. If people had any courage, he should be impeached tomorrow and shown the fucking door.
Well, and it's the party. I mean, remember in his in the well, I guess it was the 2016 Republican convention was the Law and Order convention, right? Or was it
Right.
2020?
Yeah.
Right.
And it's just so crazy because it's like the basis of law and order is just being completely ignored. And for all these people who say, like, oh, our country was founded on law and order and all this stuff. And it's like, well, what happened to due process for this poor man? I mean, it literally makes my heart hurt so much thinking about this poor man and his family. And, even today it came out that Turkish woman who was arrested at Tufts in Boston, that before she was arrested, her entire like record was cleared. That the State Department said, "Oh, she's actually not been tied to any of this and whatever." And they still went and they fucking arrested her and they sent her
Yeah.
to a detention camp without her asthma
Yeah.
medicine and they made her remove her hijab. And it's just like none of this is law and order. I don't care like which way you slice it.
I
Stephen Miller is even getting tongue-tied on Fox News trying to
Right.
explain it.
I think what's when I think about, okay, what are the politics of this, right? I think that when you look at deporting criminals or so-called criminals, and I say so-called criminals, including this gentleman who is obviously not a criminal, but in the right media ecosystem, he has been labeled all that.
Right.
So when you're deporting all that, it no matter where they're going, that is popular among people, right? People, the polls show that, yeah, if somebody's committed a crime, they should not be allowed here, right? Illegal aliens and such. Um, I think where all of that, they're doing the easy layups, the Trump administration, as far as that kind of thing goes. But it's obviously not going to stop there. So the question is, when does it move into that individual who is, came here illegally, but has been in a community for 15 years, maybe has a small business, maybe has a family, maybe is an active member of the parish, and when that person gets ripped from their community and this sort of very upstanding undocumented immigrants get sent to these places, what is the public tolerance for that? And I think that is where, because we know it's coming, right? So
Yeah.
these guys aren't going to stop. So is that the thing that changes the political wins for people? Because when you poll that, a lot of the polling on that suggests that people draw a very hard line with that kind of thing. Particularly like DACA recipients and folks like that. So I'm okay. When is the administration gonna put their sights on those folks? And is that what it's gonna take to change the political tide on this sort of thing?
But I think we should be wary of him. Um, Anna said that he jokingly said, and a lot of people were reporting it as if it were true too, um, that yeah, you better build some more prisons because we're going to send some homegrown people there. Now,
Yeah,
it obviously was a joke. Donald Trump is joking all the time, but unfortunately, that's the way it starts. It starts out as a
Hmm.
joke to see how, just kind of test the waters. And
right.
then those jokes become more serious and then they become reality. That's the whole fucking game with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Uh,
Totally.
I tell people I grew up with a weird situation in the 60s, 70s. My father was a malignant narcissist. He was a lot like Donald Trump in many ways.
Mm.
Um, he wasn't as wealthy as Donald Trump, but he was pretty well off. He was very successful when he was young, but it was all about him. And as soon as I saw Donald Trump speak in a political way, I go, I know that motherfucker, and
Mm.
this is not going to end well. And that's what kind of encouraged me to start talking about it.
Interesting.
I know who this guy is. You better listen because it's going to get fucked up real quick. And not surprisingly, it has.
Yeah.
But Donald Trump is a guy who pushes the envelope. And unless he's stopped, he will take it over the edge. And that's what people have to understand. He will turn this into a catastrophic disaster. He's done it with everything he's ever done in business, family, everything.
Right.
He's
Right.
Everything's crashed into a fucking pile, and he will let the country crash in a pile because that's just how he does business.
Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you a question about, who's going to stop this, right? Because I think we are seeing perhaps the most spineless Congress and Senate we've ever seen.
No
But
question.
I'm thinking about two specific individuals who we talk about on our show. Victoria Spartz, Congresswoman from Indiana, Ukrainian-born, immigrated here, and Mike Lawler, by all accounts, a fairly moderate Republican from Westchester County area. And so are kind of two of the brave Republicans holding town halls. I think it's been amazing to see, this whole town hall thing, and just the fact that Republicans won't even face their constituents. But Victoria Spartz has been greeted with an enormous amount of vitriol and very angry town halls. And she's kind of been digging her heels in a little bit. And
Yeah.
Mike Lawler, I think, also facing the music, but I think his constituency maybe a little less, angry, shouting kind of town hall. But what I think is interesting is that, these are two young politicians who have built their career on politics, i.e., getting reelected. And so, how many town halls is it going to take? How many angry voters confronting them is it going to take for them to start acting as that check and balance against an administration whose policies are not reflecting the broader group of folks who voted for them? I mean, people voted for Trump because he was going to fix inflation, fix the economy, lower costs, and fix our border. Well, okay, deporting gang members from our existing prison isn't doing a goddamn thing for the border or the price of eggs. And so it's like Mike Lawler and Victoria Spartz want to and maybe need to get reelected. So at what point are they going to start to course correct?
I think you have an overly optimistic view of how they would go about getting reelected. I feel like,
You
I mean,
know?
I'm the most
Yeah.
optimistic among us for sure. But I think the problem is that, look, we don't know where Elon Musk is going to stand in the next year and a half. It already seems like he's
Man,
going to
his
be
balloon is losing air
falling
pretty
out of favor.
quickly.
His rocket ship is
Yeah.
maybe not on
Yeah.
course. Um, but I think the problem is that I'm going to use Mike Lawler more because I think he's a bit more moderate than Victoria Spartz.
Yeah.
But somebody like
Agreed.
him, he could lose a primary. And
Yeah.
so if you have Elon Musk threatening Mike Lawler with a primary challenger, I've said this is my hill that will die on is that we need a new primary voting system because
Mm.
only the base votes in primaries, which means the most extreme candidates usually win, unless you're in a very sort of like swing district. And I think then what happens is that you don't have the opportunity for someone like a Mike Lawler to speak out when they are elected because they're afraid that they're going to get primaried. And they know that if they get primaried, that moderate part of even the right in their district is not going to necessarily come out and vote in the primary. Instead, it's going to be the MAGA people who then are going to go for the Elon backed candidate or the whoever backed candidate. And then that person is going to run. And even if they lose, which by the way, we've seen this happen in the past, that the more extreme candidate has won the primary and then the seat has flipped to the other party, even
Yeah.
if they lose, like it still is sort of a success for Donald Trump and the MAGA people in a way because they're getting more of their people in those races.
Growing up with a psychopathic dad who would fly off the handle, it caused me to learn how to read people. And I do it
Mm.
Mm.
automatically. Every time I meet somebody, I go, okay, who is this fucker? What's this? I read
Yeah.
situations too. And I've been looking at the Republicans in Congress. And if I was a Republican in Congress, I'd be thinking about changing things up because the way
Mm.
things are going with Donald Trump, we can see the end. We
Mm.
can see the
Mm.
end coming. I mean, it's going to come in a crashing tumult.
Yeah,
Um,
JD
and
Vance
whoever,
certainly is not taking that.
no,
He
no,
can't even
but
hold a trophy if you saw it.
no, I saw that. But but
That was
but
great.
but but the point is that if he crashes and you're still standing next to him, you're crashing with him.
Mm.
He'll be a pariah and you will be a pariah. So this would be the time if there was somebody confident enough and had enough courage to say, okay, I see the end here. I'm going to be the first one to stand up and push back. Maybe I don't win a primary, but maybe I end up being a fucking hero. Because as
Mm.
soon as one person steps up, then another person will. Nobody wants to be the first one. So if you're the first one, you maybe have to take a hit. But let's be honest. If this is the future of Congress, do you want to fucking be in Congress like this?
Right.
No. So
Well, we
stand
saw
up, push back.
one of our like on the Republican side, we always talked about Mike Gallagher, who was from
Mm,
Wisconsin, who left Congress. I mean, in his statement, it basically was because he was like, I'm fucking fed up with this. And he was a Republican politician that was, by the way, very, very strong on China. He started the China caucus in the House. And he's a perfect example of like, I think it's I mean, I have empathy for how on all sides of the aisle how hard it must be to do this job right now and how hard it
Yeah.
must be to balance your own personal morals with the messaging that you have to put out, especially if you're a Republican. But somebody like Mike Gallagher, like he could have been the kind of person that would have stood up, especially now with what's happening with China. But he has a family and he was like, I can't do this anymore. This is not for me. And so my fear is that the people who are maybe armed with that sensibility maybe don't have that courage or that fight in them or that
Yeah, clearly.
sacrifice, by the way.
Clearly, there is no courage in the Republican Party
Yeah.
because these people know exactly what's going on is wrong, is bad, is unconstitutional.
Mm,
If they were there to truly represent the people and protect the Constitution, they could not abide by this shit. They just
yeah.
couldn't if they were legitimate, credible people, but they're not. And I have the same problem. You have the base and the Trump humpers around Donald Trump, but the other ones will say, well, I'm not really in with Donald Trump. I'm a more reasonable-minded Republican. As far as I'm concerned, they're all fucked because even if they don't believe in what he says, they help support it. And there
Yeah.
are accessories after the fact.
all right,
Yeah.
so I have a question.
All
This
right.
is kind of a crazy question. Obviously, Trump would not hire us to advise him, nor would he listen to us if he did. But what would you advise him to do right now as president? I mean, what would you how would you because I think about it, it's like he only understands in terms of like winning, right? So like
Right.
what would you tell him is the win right now?
Now, when you say that, are you talking about on January 20th or right now?
Oh, well, I guess right now he's sort of dug himself a little deeper hole than he had then. But yeah,
Well,
I mean now, like yeah,
right now, he's already done the damage to himself. When he came in, he could have just wrote out this economy and
right,
crowed about Biden's economy. What he did was stupid because now it makes him look bad. Or does he really care because he doesn't have to get elected again? At this
right.
point, knowing what I see is going to happen, if I was Donald Trump, I would say, I'm not feeling good. I'm going to resign, slink off quietly, and try to live the rest of your life with
Hmm,
some kind of normalness, because his life is going to be fucked when this is done. This isn't going to
Mm,
go to 2028, and you know I don't know about Donald Trump with his immunity, but he'll be 80 years old, 90 years, 85 years old, whatever he'll be. But all those people around him, like Elon Musk, those little techno twinks that are with Elon Musk, all the other fuckers, like a lot of these people are committing crimes. And God help
yeah.
them
yeah.
when the Democrats get elected, because there's going to be people being
Well, I
indicted.
think that'll happen as soon as 2026. I mean, I do think I don't think the Democrats will take the Senate necessarily, but there's obviously a very good chance they'll take the House. And it'll be very interesting to see what they can do with that power to bring, because I think the fear that I have, which is something that frustrated me a little bit about when Biden left office, which I understood, but is now this kind of trend of these presidential pardons. And so my fear is that Democrats need to get on it in 2026 because I think in 2028, if Democrats, even if they win everything, Trump is gonna, or whoever is, in that position, is going to administer all these presidential pardons. I think kind of like Biden did. I'm not saying it's the same thing, it's the apple and oranges, but this precedent of presidential pardons so that like literal criminals are not gonna be able to be questioned and even subpoenaed and definitely not charged with anything. I find it very frustrating. And I felt like presidential pardons were reserved for people who actually did good things. And look, I take issue a little bit with how widespread Biden didn't, but I also understand it. So I'm of two
Well,
minds.
here's the thing with Biden though, as far as his pardon of his kid. Of course, he's going to pardon his kid because Donald Trump said he was going to attack him.
Yeah, no, I
You know,
yeah,
unjustly. I have a problem with people complaining about him pardoning uh, Hunter Biden when Donald Trump pardons fucking criminals that are ridiculous. You know,
totally.
people from the dark web to Steve Bannon to Roger Stone. I mean, there's no comparison. I think with Joe Biden, I think Joe Biden was a good president. I think he was a good guy, but
I agree.
I think he was your grandpa's president.
Yeah.
Meaning he
Mm.
was a president. He would have been a great president in the 90s. He did a good job for what he
Yeah.
had to deal with, but he was the wrong guy at the wrong time because we needed somebody of this era. He's
Yeah.
not of this era, and that's what hurt him. You know, toward the end, we thought there'd be some fight. Like Merrick Garland, for example, I hold him responsible for where we are right now today. Because if he had done his job, Donald Trump would have been convicted and
Mm.
shamed and put in jail or whatever would have happened. But he didn't do anything. I don't fault Biden for hiring him because he seemed like a reasonable choice at the time. But after a year of doing nothing, Biden should have fired his
Mm.
ass.
That's interesting. Well, it's interesting hearing you talk about like a president for this time because I think that what is very concerning to me, and I try to kind of keep my updated on, is just why we're also now seeing this youth bend towards conservatism. And I think a big part of it is because of something that you talked about before, which is just like this general feeling of distrust. And for some reason, that Donald Trump is like emblematic of that. And I think a lot of young people younger than us specifically, are even more distrusting in institutions because they feel like everything has been kind of like ping ponged around for the entire decade of their adolescence. And I wish that we had had someone other than Biden in that moment for that very reason, because I think that it was like a critical moment to capture a very specific type of Gen Z, specifically Gen Z men. And Biden couldn't do that. And I think that then they became lost to not even Trump, but more like the YouTube verse of machismo
Well,
podcasters and
let
YouTubers.
me add a adjective to that. It was fun,
Mm,
right? I mean, when you look at the going to Trump rallies, going to the listening to him on the podcast, seeing him show up at UFC, it's fun. There is like, I think that at the end of the day is the thing that has drawn young people to the Republican Party. I think when you ask them, when you start going to a policy level, they don't know what the fuck is going on. And
Right.
I don't know if they even really care. But here's what they know: the Democrats aren't fun. Democrats are telling me words I can say, things I can't do. They're policing me. They're making me afraid. Trump's letting me do whatever the hell I want. And I think, yes, part of that is that kind of like, white young male feeling like they now are suppressed somehow. But I think that ultimately it comes down to who's throwing the better party. And
hmm,
right now, the Republicans are throwing a way more fun party than the Democrats. And I think the Democrats need to figure out, and I think it's going to be the young Democratic leadership that finds a way to say, okay, we're throwing a great party too, but we're also not crazy. And
mm,
how do you coat the bitter pill of policy in terms of getting people excited, but not feeling like you're giving them a book report or like a talking down to every time you speak to them?
Well, it's funny, that's a good point. You got to consider your audience. And when I
Yeah.
look at millennials, and I know this because I raised millennials, when you get millennials who grew up on fucking Jackass, they have a
Yeah.
different perspective of what they like and what they don't
Yeah.
like. And you're absolutely right. There was a time when politics was very serious. We had Walter Cronkite, we had boring
Right.
ass politicians, and that's the way we fucking liked it. Boring. But over time, there is very little journalism. It's all performative. That's why I got angry when they said, um, Cory Booker was being performative. Everybody's being fucking
Yeah, the
performative.
Right.
performance
The
is the
fucking
Yeah.
point.
news,
Have
the
you seen the
politicians.
president? Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so you have to recognize that and whether while it may be distasteful to you as a serious politician, people always say the presidential or any election isn't a popularity contest. Bullshit. That's exactly
Yeah.
Yes,
what
it
it
is.
is.
Yeah.
Because
Totally.
aren't you guys, I know I'm disappointed with my people, old people. You got to be disappointed knowing what you guys know now and what you talk about now. It's very disconcerting to talk to somebody who seemingly knows nothing and has no interest in learning anything. They read a
Mhm.
headline and that's their narrative right there. There are a lot of people that don't want to know or care to know about what's really going on and what's really true. So the perception they get is like Michael says, it's a fucking party. That's more fun. Let's do that. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think
So,
that's why
and
you need people on the left who can message that this is a party too. And I agree with you about Cory Booker. Like, I got annoyed when people are like, "Oh, I didn't do anything." I was like, "Well, first of all, what do you expect them to do? They
right.
literally can't,
They can.
they can't practically do anything." But also, the performance is the point. Like, it's good to perform, and I think
Yeah.
that's why people love AOC. Like, she's the ultimate performer. She has
So,
been
Anna,
since the
who's your
moment.
dream team? Who's
Me?
your Democratic dream team? Yeah, because we talk about this on
Now,
our
I want to
show.
hear this. I
Like,
want to hear this.
who's like your top five lineup,
Oh my
starting
God, I
lineup,
wish
and
I
you get five.
became, I wish
You
I
only get
came
five.
prepared
I'll
with
give
this.
you my five, but
You mean
you've got
just
to go
like
first.
starting lineup, not president, vice president?
Correct. Correct. Starting lineup. Like, give me top
Okay, well,
five
if you have yours, I want you to go first so I
okay.
can think about it.
Um, Jason Crow, Jake Auchincloss. Let me start with the young white men. Uh, we'll get that out of the way. Um, I think that I think Sarah Jacobs. Although, actually, I will say, having just interviewed Brittany Pedersen, I think I put Brittany Pedersen on that list. Maybe over Sarah Jacobs, but Sarah Jacobs is great. I don't know. Don't play her this clip. All right, so that's three. Lauren Underwood, hands down, Lauren Underwood, fantastic Democratic Congresswoman, former nurse in the Chicago suburbs area. Um, and then I think Ruben Gallego.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's my starting five.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm gonna give a starting five in my like ideal reality, which is that it's
Yeah.
all women running the world. And we've taken over
Yeah.
and it's just young women in charge. No, I think I actually would agree with you on Brittany Pedersen. Mike, I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she is a congresswoman from Colorado's 7th district. She's, if you've seen the video, like she's the woman who's had her baby in Congress recently,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
literally
yeah,
on
yeah.
the House floor
Yeah.
making a
She's
speech
great.
like right after breastfeeding. And what's amazing about her is that her, again, we go back to the story, she was raised by a mother who was addicted to opioids for 20 years and only I think she's been sober for the last 7 and has been in recovery. And so Brittany Patterson grew up as this like high risk youth. She just has an amazing story. So I would say her because I think that if she can like really learn how to deliver her story, that would be great. Next on my list would be Delia Ramirez, who is,
Mm.
I think, because immigration is going to come to the forefront, I think that she's going to have a unique ability to speak about this. She's a representative from outside Chicago, and her husband is actually a doctor recipient. And so I think that just the personal nature of being able to empathize, similarly to I think Ruben Gallego, sort of who's very immersed in the Latino community of Arizona. I think Delia Ramirez is kind of like the next generation of potentially liberal Latino women who can speak to some of what's happening with these undocumented folks. Um, and then Haley Stevens. I love Haley Stevens
Mm.
from Michigan.
Yep.
And because I think that Michigan's an ever important state, and she certainly has a handle on it, especially if you've listened to her speak. She sounds more like she's from Michigan than any person I've ever heard in my life. Um, I would agree with you on Lauren Underwood. I think, I don't know, Mike, do you
Yeah.
know about Lauren Underwood? Are you familiar
I
with
know
her?
a little bit. You know, I wanted to say this too, as you guys are listing these off, and you guys are obviously very in touch with what's going on in politics. I will tell you this, that the majority of the people you're naming, most people out here won't know who you're talking
Yeah.
about because they're
Yep.
not
Right.
in the news all the time. We're
Yeah.
Right.
inundated with all these other things, so they won't even know. But go ahead, tell me about Laura
I
Well,
mean,
Underwood.
I
and
think,
that is whole our whole endeavor with our show, Political Playlist Happy Hours, that we want to, focus on these young leaders who are really having an effect in government. Obviously, the Democrats have less effect now than if
yeah.
they controlled the House.
But
But
I but I think like, Mike, I've listened to your show a lot and it's like I think a lot I've heard you talk about this idea of sort of, the how the Democrats need to fight and there needs to be kind of this like pushback to Trump. And I think that we need to figure out who these people are going to be. And I
Right.
think that the young people in Congress specifically, I don't know if it's just like the energy level with age or with, being younger or whatever, but you get a lot of fight out of these people. And I also think that when you look at, as Michael said very early on when we were talking about why we started Political Playlist, the average American is 38 years old. So if you think about who are the most, I mean, we know obviously young people vote at a lower turnout, and hopefully that will begin to change, but who are like the most eligible people to vote? It's young people. And if they can see
Right.
somebody
yeah,
like them, like AOC is sort of obviously the star student of this, then we just want people to know that there are a lot of AOCs out there. There are a lot of people who are speaking to the issues that you care about that have the charm and the charisma. And I'll just quickly get back to Lauren Underwood because I do think your listeners should know about her. She has been in Congress for a few terms now. She flipped a district near Evanston, Illinois, from red to blue, and she did this in a with like very little money and very little name recognition. But she worked under Obama in healthcare policy. She's a former nurse, and then she moved into the policy sector. And one thing that I think has become very lost in terms of policy discussion, but still is very real for most Americans, is the conversation around healthcare. And so I think that someone like Lauren Underwood, who can speak healthcare fluently and can really talk about what's happening in healthcare in America, she's someone, and she's funny and she's charming and she's beautiful, and like I just think that she's someone that maybe she's not going to, be the next Speaker of the House or the next president, but I do think that people are looking for others to turn to in the way that they might be turning to AOC. Someone like her is definitely worth knowing
Can I
about.
also just add too? I mean, we on our show we do endeavor to be nonpartisan from the standpoint that we cover the right as well. And I think if I were to give you a quick Republican lineup for me, I think Mike Lawler and Nicole Maliotakis would be top of that list. I think Tony Gonzalez of Texas would be top of that list. I think Brian Stile of Wisconsin would be top of that list. And I think my fifth, maybe. I mean, it's funny because we mentioned two people who are no longer, or we mentioned one, Mike Gallagher, who's no longer in Congress, and Peter Meyer, who is also no longer in Congress, former congressman from Michigan. I think these are folks who definitely, well, at least Gallagher and Meyer were booted out of the party because they weren't MAGA enough. And I think the other people that I named have found a way to still stay like the MAGA people let them in the party, but like maybe they're not the MAGA cool kids.
Yeah.
Um,
They're the ones that I
yeah,
think in the
like,
world you described, Mike, where people begin to maybe stand up to
mhm.
Trump. Like that's a list of people that
That
could
could, yeah,
and have in very specific ways in the
yeah.
past, but have obviously resisted doing so in a bigger way.
Let me ask you guys something. After the election on November 5th, and maybe I said this out of frustration, but I kind of tend to believe it right now. I came to some realizations about this country that I didn't believe before. I thought Kamala Harris would be a great president. I said, no way she loses. She's too qualified. She's too smart. She's saying the right things. And Donald Trump happens to be the worst fucking candidate in the history of this country. 34 felonies, the adjudication of rape and all this stuff. There's no way. How does this guy win? So I was using common sense and logic, and that kicked my ass, obviously. Common sense and logic didn't come into play in this election. But after this election, I came to the realization, and I may be wrong about this, but I don't think I am. I get the sense that whoever runs for the Democratic Party in 2028, it's important we win. It's absolutely crucial we win. But I feel like it has to be a white man because of the amount of racism and sexism in this country. It's far worse than I thought it really was. And I think that played a big role in Kamala losing. I don't know if it was.
You're gonna have to edit. I'm sorry.
No, you know what? I ain't gonna edit.
I
This
love
happened the
it.
other day. I'm in a place that's not my Wi-Fi, so it just dropped out, and I
Okay.
knew once it dropped out, it would come back. So
Yeah.
it kind of edits it anyway, and I don't mind having mistakes
Perfect.
in there because I'm not perfect. My point I was getting at was, and we're in the
Yeah.
later
After the
stages.
election.
I just feel that this country is more racist and more sexist than I ever imagined. Do you feel that way for the younger folks?
100%. I felt that after Hillary Clinton lost. I was like, well, first of all, I felt that during Obama, when you started to see the Tea Party forming, I was
Mm.
pretty young still at that point, but I was like, oh, everyone's still really racist. Like the
Yeah,
fact that there's this much backlash against somebody that I felt was so needed for this position, that at that point, and I like really worked a lot on Hillary's campaign and got very immersed in it. And um, similarly to Biden, I don't think that she was the person for that moment potentially. But obviously, when you talk about qualifications, and I got to know her and knowing her in private, I was like, this woman will be such a good president. Like it devastated me when she lost. And I, I mean, I was 26 at the time, and it was really interesting. My dad had he had written something. He had been asked to write something for this like women's magazine, More magazine, which I think has been around for a long time. And he wrote something about his mother. And he asked me, this was before the 2016 election. He asked me, did you ever feel like because you were a girl that you were not afforded the same opportunities as the boys in your class or then, men at work? And I was like, no, I've kind of always felt like I was an athlete. I was like, I never felt like I was, lesser than because I was a woman. And my answer immediately changed after Donald Trump was elected because I suddenly was like reflecting
Mm.
on my experience as a woman and how I felt like I had been let down by so many people in our country and in our world, and that my existence was like not good enough because if Hillary Clinton and her qualifications weren't good enough and that buffoon beat her, then like how am I ever supposed to kind of feel like I'm
right.
qualified enough? And so it's a very long-winded answer to your question, but like I've felt that for a really long time, and I was the complete opposite of you. My mom was like you. She was like, there's no way Kamala's gonna lose. I was like, she's gonna lose. I knew it.
Mm.
I was like, there is no way that a woman, look, maybe I feel more sensitive to the female side of it because I'm a woman, but I'm white. But I was like, I just don't feel like there are enough people in this country who think that a woman can be president. I've felt that for a long time, and I think Kamala getting beat affirmed that.
I think
I
it's more
think
gender
from
than race. I do think it's more gender than race.
I do
I
too.
would agree. I mean, maybe if
Yeah.
I was not white, I might feel differently, but I would agree. Yeah.
I think like I sorry to interrupt you, but I was gonna just chime in and say, from my perspective, it felt like the eye-opening thing for me was, oh wow, for the first time we haven't had, two men battling it out, right?
Right.
And so the how much better and harder and above average the female, and in Kamala's case, a female minority, had to be in the eyes of so many people. And that was pretty eye-opening for me. I mean, I think I took for granted during, the Obama '08 campaign, you know, just how pretty normal that seemed to be. And I think, credit where credit's due to a opponent like John McCain, right? Who I think really upheld some incredible norms and had a lot of decorum. And,
Yeah.
and the famous clip, of course, is of the woman, at the town hall, and he kind of, claps back saying, no, 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 he's a decent man. He's just my political, opponent here. And I think that, you know, God, if we could go back to those days, that would be great. Um,
Wonderful. Yeah.
yeah, but I think what's so interesting to me, somebody made the comment when this was like in January of this year, kind of around the inauguration, and they were kind of confiding in me, and they knew that they listened to our show, and um, they were like, I just couldn't get behind Kamala. I just didn't think she, had the real immigration policy, and it's like it's amazing to me how somebody, a voter, could be holding Kamala to a certain policy level standard, but then at the same time excuse a candidate like Donald Trump in
Yeah.
just about everything. And again, for this person who was saying this to me, they were like, I think Donald Trump is just going to get the economy humming. And and those are the exact words, humming. The economy humming. I mean, great. So going back to my question about how would you advise Donald Trump? I'd say, bro, let's get the economy humming. It
Hmm.
ain't in fucking tariffs,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
like,
the economy has a death rattle now,
yeah.
and
Oh my
you know
God.
when Donald Trump lost in 2020, and make no mistake, he fucking lost. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah.
When he lost in 2020, it, 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 it it's my opinion that people were coming out of the pandemic. They saw what happened to the economy. They uh, they saw what Donald Trump was like, the shit show that he brought to the table every day. But I think somehow in those 4 years, by way of the Democrats or by way of the Republicans, people fucking forgot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They forgot he was an incompetent fool. And so now I'm wondering, does that help us going into 2028? We are going to go through some shit. We're already going through some shit 90 days in. It's going to be bad for a lot of people. Uh, do you think, well, one of the mistakes they said that Kamala did, and maybe it's true, it was about talking about how Biden was terrible, or not Biden, Trump was terrible. And what you should have focused
Mm.
on, what am I going to do for you? How am I going to fix this stuff?
Hmm.
So we probably shouldn't make that mistake again. But after this shit show that Donald Trump will put on, and it will be well in people's memories, that's got to be helpful to the Democrats in 2028. But I still think they have to address this situation where they're above it all. We're the good people, so just vote for us. Now, how are you going to
Yeah.
fix the shit that's fucked up now?
Yeah.
I
I
would
agree.
say I think two things I took for granted and I underestimated. I underestimated, and I'm curious about your point of view on this too. I underestimated how many people ultimately made women's rights a priority voting issue. I was
Yeah,
very surprised at the how that did not rank as high for a lot of voters and how immigration, however connected or disconnected, I think a lot of people are from immigration, right? I mean, you live in Connecticut. Don't like what your biggest issue is the border. Like, come on, you know what I mean? Like, that is I don't understand that. Obviously, there's real challenges at the border, and I don't mean to minimize that or anything, but I think what if I was to advise any politician running, and I think a mistake that maybe Kamala made that others can learn from is, you know, people asked her, well, you've been vice president for 3 years. Why didn't you fix the border? Well, she kept talking about how, well, I'm vice president. I don't have that power, blah, blah, blah. And I support the Langford bill, blah, blah, blah. What I would say is get a copy of the Langford bill. And this is the James Langford bill that in the Senate he negotiated, that was the most conservative immigration and border security bill we've seen come through Congress in 30 years, I would say.
yeah,
If I was a Democratic candidate, I would get a copy of that bill and I would read it bullet point for bullet point and say, this is my immigration policy.
Mhm.
And who cares if it was James Langford's immigration policy. Like that is it. I think that people in this country writ large care much more about immigration than Democrats have understood them to care about. And I think obviously there's been an enormous amount of fear mongering from Trump in that regard. But I think if you can present a solution and a strategy and a plan in a way that makes sense for people, that's going to be your most effective thing as far as winning an election. And so I take immigration as an example of one of many things that you need to have a plan for, but that seems like a layup. It's a major issue, and here's a layup. And I think the more you can articulate like a clear, simple plan for people, the more that's going to resonate. And I think that's something that, sadly, for a lot of people, Kamala didn't do enough of. And Trump kept speaking this great sales pitch that just broke through in a way that she couldn't.
Well, just about the sexist country thing. I mean, the fact that
Yeah.
women's rights didn't move
Right.
people is all you need to know about where
Yeah.
people stand in our country, even good people, even people on the left. So
Right.
What people have to understand about immigration or the border's been a problem for 100 years. There's not been one president that's been able to address it and fix it. The fact that it's the most important issue can be attributed to only one thing. Donald Trump and the Republicans fear mongering about it. Oh, the brown people are coming. They're taking your jobs. They're doing this. It's all lies. It's all
Right.
bullshit.
yeah.
But they were successful in carrying the narrative when it comes to that. So maybe we address immigration, but since there's really no way to fix it completely because nobody's been able to do it, maybe we just try to change the narrative. Like, oh, they're taking your fucking Social Security. I bet they're more worried about their Social Security than they are the immigration.
Well, I think that's the key is that obviously the world that we're living in right now, unfortunately, you have to play to people's fear if you want to get through to them because
Yeah,
playing to people's good hearts
Yeah.
has obviously not worked.
no.
And so I do think that it's like logically the three of us and I'm sure the people listening to this podcast know that it's not because the Mexican immigrants are coming and taking your jobs. They're actually coming and growing your food because no white people want to do those jobs and that's the
Right.
reality of it. But like the thing about Social Security, the thing about Medicaid. I mean, Michael mentioned Tony Gonzalez, who is a Republican from Texas. He actually represents the district that the Uvalde shooting was in, and he
Right.
voted for the bipartisan gun safety bill in the aftermath of that. And he got censured by the Texas Republican Party because of that vote. And he survived and he got reelected because obviously his community was behind him. But he has actually so he's a Republican, but he's someone who's been he lives on a border district. He's been
Yeah, like El
very
Paso area.
yeah, he's
Yeah.
been very ardent on how he speaks about border security versus
Yeah.
immigration policy and how border
Yep.
security is one thing and immigration policy is another. And that's all just set up to say that I saw recently that he has actually been holding these community meetings with different officials in his community about his plans to protect Medicare and or Medicaid, sorry, Medicaid. And what is so interesting to me about it is that he's doing this kind of on the DL. He's putting it on his Twitter account. He's not really talking about it on cable news, but he's having these meetings in his community because he knows that it's something that's important to his constituents. And I believe that he's actually built his constituents' trust quite a bit in the aftermath of that horrific shooting. And so, as a Republican, he can kind of, talk to maybe some of the MAGA people in his district and still get their vote if he's being a little bit not fully aligned with Trump. And so, it is this thing of like, he sees they are going to take your Medicaid. I don't want them
Right.
to. I'm going to try to protect it. I'm going to do all these things because I know how important it is to you. And I'm a Republican and I'm saying that. So I think Democrats, I think they're already doing it, but it needs to be this double down of like, you were afraid of immigrants. I bet you're afraid of dying more. I bet
Yeah.
you're afraid of losing your prescription more. I bet you're afraid of your grandparents not having their Social Security or your parents or whatever. That that fear has to be instilled more than like this myth about immigrants taking your jobs, which can be dispelled so easily.
Well, I think that's a big red line for a lot of people. People always wonder what's the red line for the Republicans to step over that and get themselves in trouble.
Hmm.
I mean, we saw 5 million people come out on April 5th. We've got another protest coming on April 19th. I have a feeling it's going to be even bigger. I think that's the message we as Democrats. I'm not a Democrat. I'm no, but I don't join clubs. Uh, because if I found a Republican that was reasonable and did the job, I'd vote for him. But I just don't know too many of them at
Yeah.
this point.
No.
And there's some Democrats I wouldn't vote for because I don't believe in them. But that's the message we have to give. Like you say, Anna, that the whole fear thing, it may be distasteful for some people to do, but it works. And at this point, we got to do whatever it takes to work to win. Once we can get control, then maybe we can settle things down, be a little more sophisticated, be a little more decent. But at this point, we're in a fucking war. And if you're going to play politics in a war, you're going to get your ass kicked. So that's why we do need the strong, younger people to come out and push back. But I think that's the narrative we've got to talk to. Because if you look at those protests, there were a lot of old people out there because they're terrified. I'll be honest with you, when I'm on
Hmm.
lives or if I do a podcast, um, I'm an old guy. I just got on Medicare this month. I took my Social Security early. Not that I needed it, but in business I learned when the money's sitting on the table, you grab that motherfucker. And that's what I did.
Right. Yeah. Take it. Yeah.
And if they took away Social Security from me, it wouldn't kill me. It would piss me off and it would be tighter. Uh, but I talk to young, older women all the time and older men. They're just absolutely terrified
Yeah.
that they are going to lose their Social Security because that's all they got. They'll be homeless. They can't eat. They can't get medication if they don't have Social Security.
Well,
I
right,
think
and the
this is
like
a
the
red line.
notion that Litvac is saying, "Oh, well, if my mom missed a social
Yeah.
security check, she
Lutnick,
wouldn't care." I
Lutnick.
mean, that Lutnick. What I say, Litvac?
Lit, I don't know. I was like,
You
what
know,
is he
that's
talking about?
well, actually, that's funny. Litvac is the name of a family doctor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Lutnick. Great, you can edit this, right? So yeah, but I mean, it's exactly what you're saying, Mike. That the what's astounding to me is how many people have supported this administration and yet are going to, or if not already, have been directly negatively impacted by their actions and yet are still finding ways to justify how this is going to work out for them in the end. And I'm curious what you guys think. Like, what do you think that is? Like, why are people now delusional and kidding themselves that, oh, well, it's going to be fine for me, even
Well,
though
that's
I'm
the
watching the stock market plummet. I'm watching Medicare, Medicaid on the table. Social Security's next. Like, yeah.
I watched this guy on TikTok. He's a young guy, probably your age. He owns a tire business. He
Mm,
acknowledges he voted for Donald Trump, and
yeah.
uh, and he said, I had no idea that this was going to happen. I get my products, rubber from overseas. I don't know what to do. And he's looking for empathy, which is ironic because Elon told us
Hmm.
empathy is weak. But now he's looking for fucking empathy. So is Elon Musk. But this guy was saying he was upset because people were coming to his page. Democrats were saying, you got what you voted for. You fucked around and
Yeah.
found out. Don't be such a fucking snowflake. And he says, I cannot believe that people can't have some empathy for me just because I
Mm,
voted for Trump and you voted for Biden. We got to come together and be friends. And I said to this guy, I said, look, man, 10 years, you've done just the opposite. I don't have empathy for you because you voted and fucked yourself over. I don't have empathy for you, but not because you're in trouble, because you voted with the hopes of hurting other people and
Hmm.
avoid being hurt yourself. So the reason
mm,
I don't empathize with you and the reason I dislike you is because your vote put a lot of innocent people in trouble and you don't care about that. You only care about you. So you're not only a victim in this situation, as far as I'm concerned, you're a fucking villain.
Yeah. Well, I think culturally, that just speaks to what I view as like the really unfortunate individualism that we've all been kind of pushed into in this era of
Mm.
time. And I feel, and maybe, I mean, you can speak to maybe it isn't recent and this is always how it's been in America, but I feel like with social media specifically and our inability to seek out community and be with people in real life, especially people our age and more so even people younger than us, that we have forgotten how to be empathetic. And we forgot, I've not even forgotten, we just don't, a lot of people don't grasp the power of empathy and the power. I'm not saying you should be empathetic for this guy. I'm saying that that guy didn't have empathy in the first place to think about, oh, when I vote because I think
Right.
that this is going to help my business, even though there's not proof of that, I'm actually voting against the safety of women in several states in this country. I'm voting against the safety of undocumented people who are growing my food or potentially working in the supply chain to give me these tires or whatever.
Right.
And so I think that this it's what I feel really is that as we move forward as a society, it's not so much we need to like kumbaya come together. It's that we need to stop living in such this like individualistic way where we only care about the things that happen to us that are in our lives that are right in front of our noses because that it's not going to help us function better.
Yeah.
It's we have to get before we cast the vote, we have to learn how to have the empathy, not after, not once it affects us, not once you meet the gay person, suddenly you're like, oh, yeah, I understand why gay marriage should be legal. It's like you should just understand that from the beginning. That should
Right.
be something that is already in your heart because you're a good person. And so that for me, when I think about like the future or my future or my family's future or whatever, I just hope that, and I don't know how it's going to happen with social media continuing to kind of infiltrate our lives and AI now more so too. But I just hope that we can learn to be a little bit less concerned with ourselves and a little bit more concerned with like the world around us. And then that can inform our vote. And maybe we'll think differently from each other, but at least we won't want to actively hurt each other.
So
I've
I don't
always,
think
go ahead. Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. I was just going to say, I don't think we're ever going to not be concerned about ourselves, first
Yeah.
and foremost. We're a people, we're hardwired to think of number one, which is us. But I think what you're speaking to, Anna, is with every political issue, it's you don't care about it until you know somebody who's affected by it.
Hmm.
And I think
Right.
it goes back to experience and, education. And obviously, that's probably a whole other podcast episode on education, but it's about what is that lived experience that can help you understand where your fellow citizens are coming from. You said gay marriage. Another issue would be like abortion. Another issue would be immigration. The list goes on, right? It's like, okay, once you know somebody who is an undocumented immigrant who came to this country and has been a lawful, hardworking, citizen, I guess, participant in the workforce, right? Your view of immigration changes. When you have that gay uncle, your view of gay marriage changes. When you know somebody who needed an abortion for whatever reason, your view of that changes. And so I think it all comes down to, how can people, I don't know that we're ever going to change people caring less about themselves first and foremost, but I think the more education and experience you can give somebody from the standpoint of like, here's what other people are going through. Here are the similarities to you, and here is how they're very different, but still at the end of the day, they're just like you. I think the more you can do that, I think the more you'll change the need. You'll move the needle for the better.
You know, I can't say that I've always been as empathetic as I should be. When I was a younger man, I always tell people, and maybe you're in the late stages of this, Michael, but when you're a younger man in your 20s and 30s, you have an affliction. You're a smart guy, so I don't think this affects you. But when you're in your 20s,
Well, you'd be
particularly,
surprised.
yeah, well, we'll talk to Anna after you go.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but young men in their 20s have a problem. They have an affliction. They have more testosterone than they do intellect. And the
Yeah.
testosterone is what carries them. And, I went through it too. At my age, at 65, I come to the realization, and I don't understand why more old people like me don't understand this or don't care about this, because they're just as selfish as anybody. At 65 years of age, my life is pretty well set at this point. I got a pension, I got Social Security. Nothing's really going to change for me. I could just stay out of this whole thing. But the reason I don't isn't worry for me. And it isn't even worry for all these marginalized people, although I believe in justice and I think injustice is
Hmm.
bullshit. But I got two kids your age. I got two grandkids, very young. And I'm thinking I'm 65. If I'm lucky, I get out of here at 85. I got 20 years. And if I leave this world a fucked up place for my kids and grandkids, how am I ever going to rest in peace? So
Yeah.
they aren't affected by this right yet, but I know they will be down the road. And we as old people should recognize that and make sure that things are good for our kids and our grandkids and our great grandkids. And that's where my empathy comes from. And then
Mm.
I get more into it and I see what they're actually doing to people in LGBTQ groups and people of color and that sort of thing. Um, it's disturbing. It's saddening. It's disconcerting that we live in a world in 2025 that is worse than it was in 2000.
So let me ask
Yeah.
you a question. So if one of your young grandkids said to you, Grandpa, what do they call you? What's the
Grandpa,
granddad?
I
Grandpa.
don't like those. I
So
don't like those weird names. Grandpa's my name.
yeah, I'm with you. So if they're like, Grandpa, why should I be hopeful about the future in your view? What would you tell them? I mean, what would you, when you look at the dynamic of things, what's the thing that gives you hope?
Well, um, I've always said to people, I said, if you don't have hope, go curl up in the corner and fucking die because that's all you
Yeah.
got left. You got
Yeah.
to have some hope.
Yeah.
And the hope I tell people is this, is what I said before. I'm 65 years old. I've gone through some shit like everybody has. I've seen stuff in
Yeah.
this country. I've seen stuff in this world. I saw 9/11. I saw Vietnam. I saw all this stuff. Personally, I've gone through things that I didn't think I would survive. Funny
Mm.
thing is, here I am at 65, sitting at my second home in Savannah, and I'm comfortable as hell. I'm married 42 years. My wife and I love to hang out with each other and go out and do stuff. Um, it's that old phrase, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to bury you unless you let it bury you. Don't worry about the past because that's gone. Don't worry so much about the future. If you focus on what's in front of you and do the best you can, you'll end up where you need to be. And I think the same is said for this country. We're learning lessons now with the economy and all this crazy shit. It seems insurmountable, but good usually wins out, generally wins out. And I believe that it
Yeah.
will here. And unless you have that hope, then what's the fucking point of living?
Yeah, I agree. I think that people our age have become way too cynical, and I
Yeah.
am always trying to be a beacon of light and say, you know, believe that it will get better and believe that it will be okay. Because if you don't, then there's no reason to fight for it or to try to do anything.
Well, I understand why people, young people like you or my kids, are cynical. I get it. I get it. And because you're younger, you're not as experienced in what happens in life. Um, but at some point, you kind of take control of your future. I'm a firm
Mhm.
believer in this. I know this sounds woo-woo, but it works for me.
Oh, I'm
I
so woo
believe
woo. Bring it on.
Yeah, I'm woo woo too. So I'm we're
I
here. We're down.
I believe because I've gone from a different point to where I am now. I believe what you think, what you say, and what you believe is what you get. You create your destiny, you create your future, and if you're negative, that's what you're going to get. So to be hopeful or to be positive about things, people always get on me and they're coming up and they're upset as hell. And they say, Mike, you never get emotional about this stuff. And that's one thing I learned early on in life. Once you get emotional and you lose your shit, it gets worse. You got
Mm,
to force
Mm.
yourself to go, okay, here's the problem. I'm going to deal with it. And
I'm
it's
still
always
learning
going
that
to come
one.
up better. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. I tell you what, this is what I tell people. I say, look, the way you think right now wasn't the way you were born.
Mm,
The way you think
Mm.
right now, you trained yourself to be this way for whatever reason, your parents, you. So theoretically, if you trained yourself to do this, you can train
Hmm.
yourself to do something different. And I can tell you where it worked. When I was a young man, I'd fly off the handle, get yell and scream and rant and rave like young men do. And then I realized that doesn't work. And I said, well, maybe I should try something different. So I just forced myself to stay calm in every situation.
Mm.
And it was hard at first, but it worked. So I kept doing it. And then over time, I retrained my mind to not lose my shit. So I think ultimately we have a lot of control over our futures and our presence, but we got to take control. Too many people get controlled by their emotions, and that's not
Mm.
what it's supposed to be. Emotions are
Hmm.
important, and I have emotions, but I control those emotions. They don't control me. I've got a wife that freaks out over everything. I got a son like that too. And I go, just fucking calm down. My wife said to me, why aren't you worried? I go, I'm just not worried. You don't have to worry. And she said this to me. She said, somebody's got to worry. And I go,
That's
no,
what
they
I say all
don't.
the time.
Nobody has to
Yes.
worry. We'll live.
I will
I
say,
appreciate that. Wow, this is very
Anna, you're taking
therapeutic.
notes because Anna does the worrying for political playlists. So,
I do the worrying for
um,
everybody.
yeah.
I'm a really, I need to take some of your
I'm
wisdom,
kind of a
Mike.
worrier sometimes. I get that.
Well,
Yeah.
whenever I do TikToks or I do podcasts, I've done this all my life, so it's kind of second nature to me. But my wife will always say, "Well, who are you going to have on today?" I go, "Well, such and such." Are you worried about that? Not with you guys, because they knew it would
Yeah.
be fine with there. But I go, "Nah, I'm not worried about it." Um, uh, and she goes, "Why not?" And I said, "Because I'm a fucking genius. I can make the dumbest person seem smart." Now, thankfully, this
Hell
was
yeah.
easy. This was easy. I don't worry about what's going to happen. I just do it. And somehow
We're
it
Mike,
always
I
works
love
out.
that.
I should tell you we've been on teleprompter this whole show.
Have you?
So, yeah, we're as I said, we're writers, so
We're dummies. No, we're smart. Well, I am
Yeah.
so smart. I am a genius. I
Yeah,
am
There you
I
go.
have a
amazing.
lot to learn.
Well, I want to thank you guys for coming on. This was a pleasure to do. I wasn't sure what to expect. I knew a little bit about you. I watched some of your podcasts, but I'm an acknowledged lazy bastard. I just sit down, turn on the mic, and start talking. That's what I do. It's
Yeah.
not what somebody who does a professional podcast or a professional radio show, but I did that all my life. I'm fucking tired of it. I'm just saying if I can wing it, and it seems to work out all right. But I want to thank you guys for coming on, reaching out and asking to come
Oh,
on.
Thank you
Because I
so
got to
much
be
for having
honest,
us.
people with a platform, I've asked people with a platform before, do you want to come on? And some of them are such a pain in the ass. And they go, well, I don't know if I can. Fuck you. I don't want you on. Just don't come. And you
yeah.
guys made it so easy. You said, can we come on? And I said, yeah, let's do it. And I'm glad I did because I know
Oh
people
man.
people will love the show. And I will tell you this, well, you probably do this with your own podcast, but this podcast goes on audio on Spotify and it goes on to YouTube, the video part of it.
Hmm.
And that's how brave I am. I was in radio all my life
I
for a
love
very
it.
good reason. But I'm throwing it out there. But there'll be a lot of comments on the video thing. And I'm sure people would love to hear from you. So if you have an opportunity, by all means, respond to some of these
We'll
people. They're
chime
great
in
people.
for sure.
That's great. Well, likewise, Mike,
Thank you,
this was
Mike.
so fun. Thank you
Really
for having
appreciate
us.
it. I do feel like
Yeah.
we
Uh,
ended on like a therapy session, so I'm really
Yeah,
happy
this
about
was
that. That's
great.
very my vibe.
Yeah.
Yes, it
No,
is.
no, I agree with you.
Yeah.
We kind of end things on a lighter thing anyway, not necessarily by design, but that's just how it always works. So I just want, for everybody listening, I want to thank you for taking the time. I hope you have a great day and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.